Hello everyone, I am Sacrobolic, your Envoy of Despair, and welcome back to WIWR. That's right, we are actually making another episode of this. I said I'd do it, and I'm doing it. Had a little bit of a theme for this episode. See if you can figure it out. We started off with Triangle Heart. Now, Triangle Heart is technically it's a hentai. It's not a very good one though. And it is an adaptation of like an Eero game from, I think the 90s. I don't know. I only watched it because of its association with the Nanoha franchise. It's about a guy, it has the basic plot of Love Hina actually. It's about a guy who suddenly like comes to be a dorm manager at a girl's dorm. And then episode 1 is about him trying to make friends with like a fox girl or something. And then episode 2 happened, and I don't remember what happens in it. I'm actually looking at a page right now that tells me there was also a third episode, which occurred. But episode 4 and 5 talk about two girls, one of which has some weird disease or something, and she has wings, and the other girl she's part of like a government experiment to make like biological weaponry, and she also has wings, and they take medication that makes them horny and gives them an excuse to have sex scenes. Honestly, the fact that they tried to have, like, there are very short episodes, they're like 30 minutes, and the fact that they tried to have, like, both sex scenes and a plot in all of these episodes means that none of the aspects of this fucking thing worked in the slightest. But I like to believe that the original Triangle Heart is totally canon to the Nanoha franchise, because now you could ask, do you have any evidence of this? And the answer is no, not in the slightest. But oddly, you can't really prove it isn't. And normally you could. Like, there's nothing, as far as I could tell, that actually contradicts the existence of the original Triangle Heart with the franchise. So I'm just going to say it's totally canon. And the implication of that is that not only does Earth totally know about magic, but we are also working on our own crazy biological super soldier experiments. We're just not quite at the same level as the mid-scientists from later in the franchise. But yeah, Triangle Heart's not very good. Alright, this brings us to Triangle Heart Sweet Songs Forever, or Triangle Heart 3. Now, this one is significantly more related to the Nanoha franchise. From what I can tell, from what I've heard, the association with Triangle Heart 3 and Triangle Heart 1 is basically not even there. Apparently, the Triangle Heart franchise just used, like, the name of the game, like, brand recognition to link sales together. So there's no, like, connections. That's what I've heard. And you could be asking, there's not even, like, an anime or anything for Triangle Heart 2, so I don't even know what happens in that. But this is Triangle Heart 3, and this is about the eldest two Takamachi siblings, obviously the most famous of the Takamachi family, trying to protect a young pianist / headmaster of, I believe, a girls' academy, might just be a regular academy, I barely remember, from people who are trying to kill or kidnap her because she owns, like, property that she inherited from her grandfather. Some connection of those words were correct. Basically, the eldest Takamachi siblings are protecting a pianist / headmaster because she owns property. There are no sex scenes in this one. They just cut it all out, which is honestly for the best. It at very least improves plot cohesion, but it was also incredibly boring, and I barely remember anything out about it. I think the last episode was like an extended fight scene or something. I don't really know. And like the Takamachi siblings have been working in like China as like Chinese cops or some bullshit. I don't know. And somewhere in around episode 2, however, two girls got into an argument inside the family restaurant's kitchen, and a young Nanoha Takamachi came in and was like, "Are y'all yelling at each other?" And the two ladies are like, "No." And they're like, and then Nanoha's like, "Okay," and then she fucking leaves. And that's her only scene in this entire anime, and it is hilarious to me that the most famous character of this fucking series only appeared in one scene to yell at two ladies in a kitchen. And she's like, I think she's like 8 or 9 in this. She's super fucking young. So that's the most memorable scene in it. And yeah, that brings us to Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha Lyrical Toy Box. So as a little bit of a history, the Triangle Heart games were a series of hentai games. They got at least 2 animes, one of which was a hentai, one of which wasn't. And a fan disc was released, which had a music video called Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha Lyrical Toy Box, which simply showed the youngest of the Takamachi siblings, who, you know, was mentioned in the previous scene, and it just showed her and a song played as like a magical girl. It's an okay video. I think at one point she transforms from a school uniform into a different school uniform, which is kind of amusing. But yeah, it got really popular with the fans of the Triangle Heart series, and it encouraged them to create a spin-off anime where the youngest sibling, Nanoha Takamachi, became a magical girl. And it's like a hilarious little origin story for an incredibly long-running franchise and like anime's longest-running gay couple. It's really amusing. You can actually watch Lyrical Toy Box on YouTube, which is where I watched it. It's just on there. It's not particularly noteworthy other than like its historical value, but if you want to see a little piece of anime history, give it a watch, I guess. It's fine. Finally, that brings us to Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha, the actual start of the franchise. I've heard that the Triangle Heart connections aren't intended to be part of the actual like series, like they're not in canon for the Nanoha universe, but I don't see any reason why they couldn't be. Maybe there is like a hard reason, but it doesn't seem, and there's still like the incestuous angle between the 2 eldest siblings that's like implied in the first season of Nanoha, so I don't see why it can't be connected, considering Earth doesn't fucking matter in this franchise anyway. But the basic idea is when a magical ferret boy on another planet fucks up, he ends up like breaking a magical artifact and it showers its pieces all over Earth. And I'm trying to remember if she found one of the pieces. I think she may have. Like a young 9-year-old Nanoha acquires one of the pieces for this magical item, and she gains the ability to use magical powers, and she teams up with the ferret boy to acquire all of the pieces. It's a very like basic magical girl plot, you know, girl gets magic powers randomly, has cute familiar, finds magical artifacts, you know the deal. Nanoha, as it turns out, is an incredibly skilled mage, even at a young age, and when they say how skilled Nanoha is, you know, they say later on in the series that she's an A-ranked mage. They would classify her as an A-ranked mage at like 9 years old. The full gravity of that sentence is like, yeah, whatever, who cares? But the franchise as a whole has a habit of actually de-escalating the power. So, from like season 3 onward, every season, the villains and like the primary cast get weaker and weaker. And as this gap starts to form, you begin to appreciate just how strong Nanoha is at age 9, because at age 9, like from the latest series, like the latest season of the show, a 9-year-old Nanoha could kill everyone in the entire cast by herself. And we're talking about people that are like 15, 16, 19, and she could easily have just soloed them from season 1 onward. It's a really weird power de-escalation that this franchise has. But back to season 1, Nanoha, while she's finding these pieces of this magical artifact, she encounters another magical girl named Fate Testarossa, and they get into a fight, and I believe Nanoha loses the first fight, but they become more evenly matched as time goes on. And you come to find out that Fate is working for her mother. I want to say her name is Precia. Working for her mother, who is like an archmage or something. I forget the term they use. She's like an incredibly powerful magic user. Possibly the strongest magic user that we've seen in the franchise. No, probably. Well, she goes down pretty easy. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, she's working for her mother, who is incredibly abusive. Like, abusive to a comical standpoint. There's like a scene where Fate is like, just like tied up, you know, kind of like crucified, but not the aggressive, like, crucifixion, like tied, crucified. And her mom's just like whipping her with a bullwhip, which is fucking crazy. And obviously, you know, her mom's a piece of shit, but, like, the reason I say it's, like, almost comical is that's, like, so over the top, that it, like, is sort of unrealistic. Not to say that I'm not sure that there have been children hit with bullwhips, but it's really far as far as child abuse goes. But anyway, yeah, so she's doing it to help her mother, and her mother is trying to find a way to resurrect her dead daughter, Alicia, and it turns out that Fate is actually just a clone of Alicia, which is going to come up more later. But yeah, so Fate's a clone of, like, her dead daughter, and so she fucking hates Fate because it's not her actual, like, birth daughter who died. But while Nanoha and Fate are fighting, they end up creating, like, a dimensional rift, like, because of how hard they're going at it, because they're both super fucking strong, even as, like, 9-year-olds. And it ends up getting the attention of the space military. I used to call them space cops, but they're more like space military. The space military, and the space military is like, yo, knock this shit off. We gotta, and Nanoha's like, I would like to help you out, space military. And they're like, sure, fine, whatever. And, like, they're like, we gotta stop Fate and her mom. And Nanoha's like, I would like to be friends with Fate. And the space military is like, that seems unlikely. And so at the end of the anime, they defeat Fate's mom, who, like, dies, and they acquire all of the pieces of the artifact, and Nanoha and Fate, like, exchange hair ribbons, like, overlooking the water, and they promise to be friends, and it's a really cute, well-done scene, especially in the historical context of, like, Nanoha and Fate being anime's longest-running gay couple. And, you know, there's things you could say about that claim. Like, one, they're never confirmed to be a couple. Look, if you're unfamiliar with the franchise, you'll figure out by the end that they're all but stated to be a couple. Hell, even the voice actresses were like, yeah, they're fucking married. And as for, like, the longest running, I mean, because the Nanoha franchise is still going. Like, there are older couples that have had a few updates, like the two guys in Cardcaptor Sakura, and then there was the Clear Card update, but there was such a large gap between those that I just can't count it. And if there's anything older than, like, Clear Card and Sailor Moon, I don't even think you can make an argument for that, because Sailor Moon is not still running. Like, they're doing a redo of the series, but I wouldn't count it in that regard, because they're not making new entries into that series like they are for Nanoha. And if there's anything older than Sailor Moon, I honestly don't know. So I could just be wrong about that, but I've heard the claim that it's the longest running gay couple in anime, and I certainly can't dispute it. And I honestly don't think, like, the only other thing I could think of is, like, something from the 80s that's still running, but I don't know anything that's still running from the 80s that would have a gay couple that's been around for that long. So I believe it is Nanoha. You can correct me if you specifically know something that disputes that, and, you know, I'll maybe check it out if I haven't seen it, I guess. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, this, like, little hair ribbon exchange scene lays the groundwork for the longest running gay couple in anime history, which is pretty cool. And it's a nice little ending to the series. And because Fate's so young, and she was kind of, like, pushed into it, her and her familiar kind of get, like, slaps on the wrist, and they end up getting, like a couple years probation. And, oh yeah, Fate has a familiar named Arf, who they forget about. They'll just forget about her later. She's important for 2 seasons, and then she just disappears magically. This brings us to Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha A's. This is a lot of people's favorite season of Nanoha, and I can understand, because it's the first one that has a sort of more complex villain, and that they're not really the bad guys. So the basic idea is that a young girl, Hayate, I think she lost her grandpa or something. They mention it, but it's super not important, despite her being a major character. And she finds this, like, ancient magical book called the Book of Darkness, and she uses it, and she summons a bunch of familiars, which are, like, magical constructed guardians from the book, based on, like, an ancient civilization called Belka, which is super important to the franchise and barely important to this season. So they end up summoning the ancient Belkan Knights, and them and Hayate end up living together for a time before they discover that the magical energies of the Book of Darkness are slowly killing Hayate when she, like, loses her abilities to walk. And so, despite Hayate saying, do not complete the Book of Darkness, because the Book of Darkness is supposed to, like, destroy planets and grant wishes when you complete it, the Knights decide the only way to save Hayate is to complete the Book of Darkness. And to do that, they need to hunt down beings with a lot of magical power, and they need to take the magical power from these entities. And this is all occurring, I believe this is specifically in Japan, actually. So it's not even just on Earth, it's like in Japan. And this leads the Belkan Knights to, yeah, of course it's in Japan, because they go to the same school as Hayate. This leads the Belkan Knights to tracking down Nanoha, and the Belkan Knights, she puts up a good fight, especially because they show that she has been practicing, because as fucking broken as she is in Season 1, she's still training to get more broken. But the Belkan Knights and their, like, techniques, and they have, like, this cartridge system that lets them store up magical energy and release it to, like, output more power than they normally be able to, which becomes sort of a staple for the franchise later on. But the Belkan Knights just kind of, like, start thrashing Nanoha, and she gets to the point where she's putting on a progressively better fight, and then Fate shows up, and this lasts, like, several episodes, I think. I think it's, like, 1, 2, 3 episodes of this, like, opening fight. And, you know, and then Chrono, who is, like, their, like, military buddy, their space military buddy, like, they all show up, and everyone's fighting, and Nanoha gets stronger as the fight goes on, because she starts pushing herself harder and harder, and then she gets, like, backstabbed from, like, a teleport attack from behind, and they just get, like, put down, and the Belkan Knights totally win and steal all their fucking power. And so it causes the, like, girls to have to, like, experiment and use, like, military technology that the military's like, shit, these guys are ancient Belkan Knights, and they use, like, dangerous ancient Belkan technology. And, like, Nanoha and Fate are like, we want some of that shit, and the military's like, that's a terrible idea, here you go. And then, so that leads them into more fights with the Belkan Knights, of which they eventually kind of win, but not before Hayate gets taken over by the Book of Darkness and goes on a fucking rampage. And I said Preshia was probably the strongest character in the franchise. I believe that Hayate, at this moment, fully taken over by the Book of Darkness, is probably the actual legitimately strongest character in the franchise, at least displayed in the anime. I know there's, like, one, like, crazy powerful woman in, like, the Force comics, but I've never read them. And anyway, it turns out some dude was behind it, because in the Nanoha franchise, some evil adult is behind everything. And I don't specifically remember his motivation. I think he wanted to complete the Book of Darkness for himself to get, like, a wish or some bullshit. I don't remember. I don't even remember who this guy was, to be honest. He didn't matter. And I don't think you ever see him again. So yeah, that happens. And at the end, they defeat Hayate, and they lose the Guardian of the Book of Darkness, but she gets to keep the book itself. And so Hayate acquires magical powers that are, like, fucking crazy. And she gets to keep most of the Belkan Knights as, like, her guardians and her, like, family members to take care of her. So that's pretty cool. And then they also get put on probation, because very rarely will anyone die in this series. Mostly you just get probation. Like, half the time there's not even jail. There's just, well, bad probation. So that's what happens in A's. Honestly, the fight scenes are exciting enough, but there's so long and there's so many of them, and, like, even the, like, improved, like, motivation of the characters, like, from the villain side, it's not enough to hold my interest. I get why this one's popular, but it's just okay. You know, it's okay to me. Plus, I end up liking Hayate and the Belkan Knights more in later seasons than I do in this one anyway. This brings us to Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha Striker S. And I believe it is Striker S and not Strikers, partially because the S is capitalized in the stylization, but also because I believe the S stands for, like, stars. Yeah, I think Stars, which is the name of Nanoha's team. So this takes place when Nanoha and Fate are in their 20s, and they now live together. there's a scene where, like, Hayate sleeps in the bed with them, but Hayate is consistently shown throughout the franchise to have a house of her own with, like, the Belkin Knights, so I think she may have just crashed at their place that night. Whereas Fate, very specifically, is only ever seen at Nanoha's house. So Nanoha and Fate live together. Hayate lives somewhere else. And they're in their, like, 20s now, and they've moved away from Earth to the, like, homeworld of the military place, which I would try and say its name. I think Midocloe, I think is what it is, but I always see it and think, midichlorian. So they moved to homeworld midichlorian. Fate is an agent for the military. I don't know what she does, because she seems to do the exact same thing everyone else does in this entire series, specifically this season, which is, like, try and take down terrorists and look for ancient magic artifacts. But she does something. Nanoha's job is a lot more easy to figure out. She teaches aerial combat, which has always been her specialty anyway. Because she's been able to fly since, like, age 9, which is considered a pretty hard to do fucking thing, which makes sense because, again, power de-escalation. Characters in later seasons can't even fucking fly, but she teaches, like, aerial combat, and Hayate decides to create, like, an elite squad, because Hayate outranks them now for some reason. Hayate decides to create an elite squad for, like, that's, like, it's like a special task force to deal with, like, uniquely dangerous threats. And Nanoha and Fate are like, we're fucking in. So they end up taking on, like, these apprentices. And there's this whole plot about the scientist who's been creating, like, they're called combat cyborgs, which are, like, an attempt at creating super soldiers through, like, robotics and science mixing to, like, make more powerful soldiers. And this is also the guy that helped clone Fate. And he's trying to create, like, a clone, like, he's trying to create a clone of, like, an ancient Belkin queen, Belkin saint, sorry. They call her a queen later, but she's a saint, to, like, get control of this giant battleship. And, like, the whole, like, season has, like, this undercurrent of military politics, but I'm gonna be honest, none of this is particularly interesting, and it's not the reason why I enjoyed Strikers so much. One thing I will say in regards to the combat cyborgs is that they have personalities, but they don't matter so much in Strikers as they will in later seasons. But I do want to address the point where the scientist says that he put clones of himself in the wombs of all of his combat cyborgs that work for him. And in the future seasons, this is never mentioned, and we never see these clone children. And none of them are pregnant during any of the later seasons. So my only assumption is that all of the combat cyborgs got abortions. That's the only thing I can conceivably think of. But I just wanted to address that point. And so what the meat of this is about, like, the new people that are being introduced, and it shows a little, like, additional techniques of magic. Like, one of the girls specializes in long range combat, like Nanoha always did. One of the girls, like, she's kind of like a hit and run fighter, like Fate. But there's also, like, a summoner. Like, they add new forms of magic that's not just, like, long range and, like, hit and run tactics or, like, the in your face melee combat of the ancient Belkins. So it's interesting to see that, like, magic isn't all just about hit and run tactics. There's, like, other techniques that can be used, like summoning, or in later seasons there's, like, golem construction, or, like, puppeting your own body, or whatever the fuck that witch girl is. So that's, you know, that's pretty interesting. And all of the, like, characters, like, you get to see how Nanoha and Fate grow up and how their personalities change over time. Like, Nanoha is, like, super nice and nurturing, but if you fuck with her, she will fuck with you. Like, she will just wreck your fucking day. And there's a great moment at the end of the fucking show. I'll get onto that one later, actually. I will talk about that later. But yeah, so you get to see, like, the characters, and, like, some of them are, like, so determined, and they do this, like, reckless, dumb shit, and you get to see them develop as, like, their instructors, like Fate and Nanaha, like, slap their shit and be like, hey, knock that off. You're being a fucking idiot. You're gonna get everyone killed. And you see them come together as, like, a team and develop as people. And it's actually the new characters and the old characters developing and changing over the course of this, like, their character arcs, that makes me think Strikers is so interesting. And it's why Strikers is my favorite season of Nanoha. Another important aspect of this is that during Strikers, Nanoha ends up, like, they acquire one of the clones created by the Doctor, and it's this little girl named Vivio. and Nanoha and Fate end up adopting Vivio as, like, their daughter. So not only do they live together, they also have a daughter who calls them both Mama. Although legally Fate is, like, her like, godmother. But, I mean, come on. You know what I'm saying? And Vivio is an okay character. One thing to note that I just, like, forgot about is that whenever someone gets their ass kicked in Nanoha and, like, they become friends with, like, another character, that character's personality will immediately completely change to a different personality. Like, it happens with Fate, it happens with the Combat Cyborgs. It doesn't happen with Hayate. Hayate actually maintains her personality pretty consistently, and the Belkin Knights mostly do too. But it happens with, like, a little girl from this, I want to say Lulu. She has purple hair. She is of marginal importance for the franchise. But yeah, everyone, their personality is just like 180, just out of nowhere. It's not great. I would like to see them having to work through their struggles more, but we got fucking time constraints, and we don't have time to develop every character. So next up, we are on Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha Vivid. Despite being called Lyrical Nanoha, Nanoha appears almost nowhere in this actual season. This is about Vivio, Nanoha's daughter, and from what I understand, the reasoning behind this, I don't know if this occurred yet or if this is later, but Nanoha's voice actress had a falling out with the creators of the franchise, and so they decided to try and move away from her as a character, and so this is actually about Vivio more than it is Nanoha, who, like, rarely appears. I think Fate appears even less than Nanoha, but yeah, so basically, Vivio now that it's a time of peace and she's been recaptured from the terrorists in the last season, she ends up working at a gym, it's kind of like a magical boxing gym owned by one of the combat cyborgs who's on probation. And there's another girl who has, like, a descendant from ancient Belka named Einhart, who is, let me be clear, Einhart is a way more important character than Vivio forever. Just the rest of the franchise, Einhart is more important than Vivio. But Einhart has somehow just inherited the memories of her ancestor, which is not the craziest thing I've heard of in a Magical Girl series. Shout out to Sailor Moon and the ability to spontaneously turn into a Neanderthal, just being a thing that can happen. But yeah, so Einhart goes around and she's trying to become like her ancestor and defeat Vivio, who is, of course, the clone of like her ancestor's, like, rival, and she does, and Vivio at no point actually defeats Einhart. And I wasn't super fan of Einhart at the beginning, but it is worth noting she does inherit all of the memories of an ancient warlord, so I guess she's okay. And there's other girls that attend the gym who you get to see, like, develop as characters. There's no real focus for Vivid, and it's a major issue for the show as a whole. Because although the new characters are interesting enough and seeing them develop is, like, interesting, the opening of this anime is dedicated to explaining the premise of Vivid and being like, hey, this one is about Vivio. We're gonna leave Nanoha to the wayside. This is about Vivio and Einhart, and they try and almost set up like a fate relationship, like a fate Nanoha relationship between Vivio and Einhart, and it never really feels like their relationship connects in that manner. It's more like they're like good friends in this regard. Like, you never really get the romantic tension. I've heard people say they, like, see it, but they don't really push it as hard as they did with Nanoha and Fate, and it's possibly because they're all pretty young and there's a bit of an age gap between the two of the characters, so we haven't really gotten into Vivio and Einhart adopting a child and living together in their 20s. But who knows, we'll see if the franchise continues in that direction. But they actually seem to be moving away from the Vivid direction regardless. Oh yeah, the opening of this, like, the introduction sets them up, and then the middle part is all about a training sequence where you get to see the characters from Strikers, and it kind of elaborates on their epilogue a little bit, and you get to see them train, and there's, like, this bullshit fight where, like, Nanoha, like, loses to one of her, like, proteges from Stars, and I like to think she held back, because otherwise Nanoha's bombardment should be so powerful everyone should have instantly lost. Like, Nanoha is consistently shown to be the strongest I mean, they show her tying with Fate a lot, but I feel like if she had to, she could take down Fate. So, yeah. They kind of gloss over the rematches. I don't know, take it how you will. It is worth noting that the, Stars and Lightning members don't have power limiters like Fate, Nanoha, and Hayate do. So that could be an explanation for that. Nanoha's literally not able to fight at her strongest. One thing that's always gets me with, shows is when power's shown to be inconsistent. If it's just, about tactics and shit, and the show lets you understand that, it's fine. But Nanoha's not the franchise where tactics actually matter, and, a weaker character can overcome a stronger character. It's a show where a little girl fires pink death lasers at you. There's no pretending that it was a tactical advantage. So maybe it was the power limiters. I don't know. But the latter half of the season sets up a tournament arc and then gets into the preliminaries of the tournament arc where all of the Nanoha girls are fighting in this tournament, and it shows them fighting against competitors, and it does a fucking great job of setting up everyone in this tournament and their competitors, and it really gets you interested in who they're fighting, and it's this is the end-all be-all. The champions here, everything's gonna go great, because now the franchise is about competitive fighting. You thought it was about space battles and recovering ancient technology. No, now we're about competitive magic fighting. And there's the end of this fucking, I'm a little bit mixed on, Vivid, but the end of this fucking season where the Golem Girl and Einhart fight, it's such a good fight. It is a really good fight, and I really enjoyed it. And they set up all of these characters, and then the season ends, and we don't get to see the actual, tournament play out ever. Vivid Strike takes place about a year after Vivid. So we just skipped over the tournament completely. So despite all of the setup, it goes fucking nowhere. Oh, I forgot to mention something about Vivid. They switched the animation to A1, which later, to A1 Pictures from 7 Arcs, which later influenced, Vivid Strike's animation. And it made certain characters unrecognizable. So if past characters have appeared, it's entirely possible I just don't fucking recognize them. Which, you could be like, oh, you could recognize them by the name. The fucking, there's so many characters in these goddamn franchise that that if you can actually recognize everyone by their fucking name, good on you, but I certainly can't. So when you change the appearance of a character, it really fucking throws me. But Vivid Strike, which doesn't even have Mahou, Shoujo, Lyrical, Nanoha, it's just called Vivid Strike, which has led a lot of people who watched it to think that this is its own standalone anime and isn't connected to anything at all. And then they get to episode 3 and it's magic. And they're like, the fuck did that come from? And it's nope, trust me, it's been there the whole time. They just unfortunately did not connect this to the rest of the franchise in a coherent manner. But anyway, Vivid Strike takes place a year after Vivid and is about 2 orphan girls, one of which gets adopted by a rich family, and the other one just continues to live on the street before she eventually just goes the homeless route and gets a job working at a warehouse. The rich girl acts as the main antagonist for this because she basically gets bullied at a really young age, and she's born with an abnormally strong body that isn't evidenced in the flashbacks, but she's born with a really abnormally strong body, guys. And so what happens is she ends up, because the bullies end up preventing her from saying goodbye to her adopted grandfather's, dying, minutes, because they just, beat the shit out of her and, bully her, she ends up, fucking wrecking them. They are not in a good place. One of the girls looks like she has a broken neck. One of the girls, they mention her skull is, cracked. It's fucking violent, and, I mean, I'm not gonna say that the girls didn't deserve to get the shit beat out of them, because they did, but the amount of damage that Renee, I believe, is her name. Renee, does to them is a little excessive by any metric. Fuck, they get ruined. But they're assholes, so I guess don't have too much sympathy. It's just, and honestly, the fact that she does so much damage to them just kind of adds to her character, because her idea is that, this all happened because I was weak, so she blames herself. And really, she grows, this horrible self-hatred. And so she ends up training with this, older girl who's, a former magic boxing competitor, but had to leave because of an injury. And she trains Renee to be a championship, like, she isn't the actual champion, but she is, like, top, like, tier, you know, number 4 in her age group, magic boxer. And she has a falling out with Fuka because they were friends during in their orphan days, Fuka being the other girl who lives at the warehouse. And Renee just beats the shit out of her and is like, fuck you. And then Fuka ends up getting in a whole lot of shit and a whole bunch of street fights. And this ends up getting her into an encounter with Einhart, who she just kind of lashes out from. And Einhart's like, that's a pretty good punch. All right, that's cool. And so Einhart takes her to the gym and is like, we want to hire you. Einhart's not in charge of this, but they get the combat cyborg's help. We want to hire you to work at this gym and maybe teach you to be a professional fighter. And Fuka's like, I'll work at this gym, but I don't want to be a professional fighter. And so the whole show is about them training Fuka to be a professional fighter. And there's this weird underlying debate. This is a real fucking mixed bag, because there's a lot to like about Vivid Strike and a lot to dislike about it. It's almost like 2 different people wrote it, and one of them was a good writer, and one of them was fucking horseshit. There's this underlying current between the 2 instructors, the trainer of Renee and the combat cyborg, who has a name that I will not remember, where it's about a debate about, like, talent versus talent and effort, but the other instructor completely misrepresents the cyborg's point, thinking that she's just talking all about effort, which she's not. So there's not even an actual point about this discussion. But it's weird that they set this up. One, because their points don't contradict each other at all, because they both agree that talent is important. And it's weird that they set this up, because you cannot deny that the reason the cyborg's gym is so effective is the talent of her like, proteges. Like, Vivio is the fucking daughter of a high-ranking government, like, secret agent and an aerial combat instructor, both of whom, as I stated before, like, in season 1 could have killed the entire cast of this show by themselves at 9 years old, easily. There's only, like, one scene where Renee briefly demonstrates an average attack from one of them, and it's considered the biggest fucking hit in the show. It's incomparable. But, like, she's their daughter. She is the clone of an ancient Belkan warlord, and she has the best fucking training available to her. Einhart literally inherited the memories of an ancient Belkan warlord and all of their fighting styles. One of the other girls, Mora, something like that, is trained by the Belkan Knights personally. Like, there's only one character you could argue in Vivid Strike that actually puts in the effort to get stronger, and it's the Golem Creation Girl, and, you know, she never wins, so it doesn't matter. I mean, she's cool, and I like her for that reason, because she actually puts in the effort and is willing to put her body on the line. But for the vast majority of the characters in the show, it's all talent, and it would have been incredibly hypocritical for the cyborg to be like, nah, talent doesn't matter. But she doesn't even say that. She's like, talent super fucking matters, but how much effort you put in also matters, which could just as easily be applied to Renee, because every scene with Renee in it is her fighting or training, or a flashback. So there's no disagreement, and that conflict is pointless. What I will appreciate about this... Oh, and Fuka has the most talent ever. Like, she manages to fight, like, Renee and, like, go one-on-one against the fucking, like, gym members, and she only gets, like, 4 months of training in this whole show, and she's a top-class fighter in just 4 months. Like, they say at one point that, like, Renee is a once-in-a-century talent, which she's not, because... I can't believe the showrunners keep forgetting this. Nanoha exists. But even so, the fact that Fuka manages to, like, fight with Renee within 4 months shows she's not a once-in-a-century talent. If anything, Fuka is, if we're going by that metric, but it doesn't matter. And so they all enter a tournament to fight Renee, and there's a fight that they set up between Vivio and Renee, who Vivio is known as the only person to have ever defeated her. And I was so pissed off going into it, because, you know, the structure of most narratives would imply that Vivio was going to lose. And the idea that Vivio, with all she has and all she can do, like, we saw her fight her fucking mom in Strikers. Granted, she's probably not as strong as she was in that fight scene in Strikers, and we know that Nanoha held back during that fight, but we know that she regularly trains with, like, A-class mages. Nanoha's only an A-class mage when she has the limiter on, by the way. Otherwise, she's an S-class. But we see them train with these people, and, like, the idea that she would just lose to this fucking rich girl who's been training for, like, a year and a half was so fucking infuriating. And it was all for nothing, because in a brilliant moment of execution, the show actually decides to keep continuity and, like, establish characters, and it prioritizes them over a traditional plot structure, and Renee fucking loses, and it's brilliant, and it's what leads to a conflict between Fuka and Renee, where you think that during the tournament they might be setting up Fuka to fight Renee during the, like, established tournament, but they end up fighting outside of it due to a deal they made earlier on. And this leads to a fight between Fuka and Renee, where Fuka wins, and you might say, that doesn't seem fucking possible with how hard Renee trains and how long Fuka's been going. And I would almost agree with you, but it is worth noting that if you want to defend this fight, Renee was not fighting seriously at the start. She was very conflicted, and she just kind of became a punching bag in the middle, and then she actually went at Fuka for a brief period, and then at the end it was just a fucking slugfest, and Fuka just had more endurance, which it is stated that the reason Renee usually goes down is you can output her damage faster than she can endure you, so it's a valid strategy that Fuka, who regularly gets punched by much higher class opponents, could outlast her. It's not to speak to, like, Renee's actual inferiority to Fuka in combat, which is good. You know, there's a valid explanation for that. But the development between two characters that you see experienced over the fight, which can almost be used as a metaphor for their relationship, is just fucking great. And the fight itself, the last fight, is where the show really comes into its own. The biggest issue is the same issue that the entire show has, which once Fuka beats Renee in the fight, Renee's entire personality swaps back to what it was as a child. And of course it does. So that's fucking Vivid Strike. The Vivid Strike specials take place between episodes 5 and 6 and as the final episode. They develop a little bit about Renee and the characters and their relationships. They show Fuka training a bit more, and then the last episode is like a beach episode. They're there. They happen. I don't have much to say about them, but they're part of the continuity of the franchise, so I just fucking watched them. Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha Reflection is technically part of the movie continuity, which is started from the remake of the first Nanoha season as a movie form, which I didn't bother to watch, and the A's movie remake, which I also didn't bother to watch. But what I do know is that despite there's, like, a claim of an alternate movie continuity, like, timeline, the first movie is a retelling of the events of season 1, but it's told after the events of Strikers, and it uses Nanoha and, like, Fate as like a framing device to tell the story from their perspectives back in time, which means that if the movie continuity is based on Nanoha and Fate talking about their past, then the movie continuity would have still been part of the main timeline of the Nanoha continuity. It would just be going through an unreliable lens, which does explain how in the Detonation movie, Nanoha loses her fucking arm, and then it suddenly just reappears, because from her perspective, she thought she did, but maybe she just had it the whole time. Or maybe they fixed her fucking arm, they just replaced it, and she has a robot arm in all of the later seasons, like from Strikers onward. I don't honestly fucking know. But Reflection is about a failed terraforming project that they got canceled. One of the girls decides to team up with, like, an old AI, who doesn't, they say she doesn't use magic, but all of her powers seem magical based, but she specifically doesn't use magic. So I guess this is one of those, like, any sufficiently advanced science is technology is indistinguishable from magic kind of things. So it looks like magic, but it's not. But which I guess makes sense with how the, like, devices that the characters use throughout the franchise work. But she ends up going to Earth, and she's trying to acquire the Book of Darkness so she can get a magic crystal that'll help her terraform the planet and, like, maybe heal her, like, sick, dying dad who is also trying to leave the planet. You know, who knows? And her other sister goes there, and it's really just a lot of excuses for fight scenes. And there's a plot twist. I actually think this is a pretty good, watchable movie with, like, some good animation, because this is, like, movie quality, so, you know, they put the effort into this one. So honestly, I would recommend watching it if it sounds interesting to you. I don't really want to give away the plot twist. Not for this one. I'll give away the plot twist for the next one. But yeah, Reflection, not bad. Pretty watchable. Exciting fight scenes. Whatever. It kind of ends on a cliffhanger, though, that leads directly into the next movie. One of those, like, Halo 2, I'm finishing this fight kind of moments. But who cares? You get to see Nanoha actually fucking fight someone at full power, which we haven't seen since 2 seconds of Strikers. Like, she only goes actually hard on someone for, like, 3 seconds when she blows a hole through a fucking ship, which is a cool scene for the record. She vaporizes that woman. But Nanoha mostly just holds back throughout the whole fucking show. So it's actually nice to see her. Granted, she's like 10 or 11 in this movie. So we don't even get to see her adult form go all out, but it's still nice to actually see her fucking fight someone as hard as she can. Finally, and I do mean finally, we're at Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha Detonation, which came out 2018, apparently, in Japan. Yeah, so this is the latest in the Nanoha franchise. It's the direct sequel to Reflection. It picks up from where Reflection ends off, like the very same scene after a brief recap. And it has, like, the villain acquiring the Book of Darkness. Actually, the Book of Darkness may have been required in Reflection. Actually, I think it was. Yes. Okay, it has the villain it has the aftermath of the villain acquiring the Book of Darkness from Hayate. It doesn't really matter. It's just an excuse for a lot of fight scenes. They establish the villains and their motivations, and they're satisfying enough. The biggest issue is at the end, it's revealed that an evil adult scientist, tell me if you've heard this one, an evil adult scientist is behind everything, and he's a man, because that is the plot of every season of Nanoha that isn't about magical loli boxing. I'm not even joking. That is the plot twist. Some fucking guy was behind it. And I know his motivation is... Actually, I just watched this movie, like, yesterday, so I know his motivation, and it was stupid. He's evil, basically. What I will say is there's a fucking... Also, this is the movie where Nanoha loses the arm, but then it reappears at the end. So either Nanoha has a fake arm from this point onward, or she fucking lied about having her arm blown off and was like, it felt like it was gone, I don't fucking know. But there's a fucking great... there's a lot of interesting fight scenes, a lot of explosions, hence the detonation, but I think the detonation refers to the final scene where Nanoha flies into fucking space and shoots down a goddamn satellite, and then a bomb goes off and she blows up and she's just floating there almost lifeless, dying in space before fate shows up and is like, girl, come on, we have to have a kid together later, can't have you dying here. And Nanoha's like, sorry, I fucked up. And then the movie ends, and all of the villains that didn't die and aren't the evil scientist man that was behind everything get, wait for it, probation. So that was the second episode of WIWR about the Nanoha franchise. I am going to edit out a lot of this, but fucking hell, just looking at the episode length, no one is going to watch this, which is hilarious to me that I put all the effort into this. Welcome to WIWR, the show no one watches because I won't shut up. The next episode I'll try and I'm not planning to make a theme for the next episode, so it might come out a little quicker. I just wanted to get through all of the Nanoha franchise before I made this episode, or it might not. I don't promise when this will come out. That's the point of WIWR, to make the exact same show I was making before, but without a release schedule. Hopefully you had fun, though. I've been Psychobolic, your envoy of despair, and this has been WIWR.